Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Much of the work that we do in helping owners plan for their exits has to do with partnerships. It could be current partnerships, one partner looking to buy out another partner, um, it, potential partnerships when an owner is considering selling the business or transferring the business to key employees or children. So it's not unusual that we're dealing with partnership issues in one way or another. It's quite common. And in past episodes with our guest today, we've discussed all of the different issues that need to be addressed in forming and or strengthening a partnership. And today, those issues will be referenced again for your benefit. But today's focus in this AI and exit planning episode uh, is the role that AI can play in addressing these issues, where AI can be helpful and where it's critical, still critical and essential to have a human trained professional uh, advising you and helping you along. Um, business owners, we're finding business owners aren't asking whether or not AI matters anymore. That question seems to have been answered. As a business owner, you're trying to figure out where it actually fits in decisions that carry weight, decisions about ownership, timing, people, life after the business, and what we're focused on here today, successful partnerships. You're asking the kind of practical questions that we're all asking, frankly. Where can AI genuinely strengthen my planning, and where does it fall short? And then there are also timing questions. Should I be integrating AI as a business owner thinking about exit? Should I be integrating AI now to build value and optionality, or does it introduce unnecessary disruption too close to my actual transition? And beneath those things, the practical, the timing, sits some more, let's say, personal questions or concerns. Does AI replace the need for experienced advisors, professional advisors, or does it simply change how good advice is delivered? How do I use it as a tool without allowing it to shape decisions that are weighty, that are ultimately personal, relational, and long term in consequence? Um, so that's the tension that this episode here, and others in our AI and exit planning series are designed to help you think through. Our topic today is the role AI can play in sensitive partnership negotiations. And our guest, who's been with us a number of times through the years, he's a regular. He's our friend and alliance partner, David Gage, Ph.D. David is a clinical psychologist. He's an author. He's a mediator. He's specialized in conflict resolution and prevention with business partners for over 30 years. He founded BMC Associates in 1990 with a focus on resolving disputes and conflict among co-owners of closely held businesses. And and then by mediating hundreds, if not thousands, of complex business partner battles, if you will, David learned everything he needed to know to create a process for preventing conflict. One day he thought, you know what? I should create a process to prevent conflict. And he did. He worked real hard on that. And the process is called the Partnership Charter. You may actually be one of many who have read his book, The Partnership Charter, How to Start Out Right with Your New Business Partnership or Fix the One You're in. David and his team, who we love David and his team, they've worked real hard over the years to fine tune the partnership charter process. And with feedback from folks like us and hundreds of other partners from around the world. And in recent years, they've developed the Design Your Partnership platform, which our firm subscribes to. We're big believers in the partnership charter process and the Design Your Partnership tool. And so we're excited to have David back with us again. Any and every time we have him with us, the listener, benefits greatly. So, David, welcome back. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're grateful to have you with us. Walter's going to ask you a question here in a second, but it's good to see you. And are you in Sarasota this morning or back here in locally?
We are in Sarasota this morning. So, but really happy to be back and to talk with you today about a fascinating topic on everybody's minds, of course.
Hey, David, great to see you.
Hello,
So
Walter.
let me ask you a question. I think because I'm not involved in day-to-day cranking out tax returns anymore, a lot of when I think of AI, I think more of kind of the fear factor. So it's like whose jobs are going to be disrupted out of existence. Are we all going to be robots going to be running everything? But I think the other way to look at it is there's people like you out there who have very significant and unique giftings that can't be replicated. But there's got to be ways that you can still utilize AI to assist you in your work with family businesses. And if that's true, what are some examples of that?
Well, thanks, Walter. That's a good place to start, I think, because it is growing more obvious every day that AI will really replace a lot of people doing what they're doing, which is a really awful thing to contemplate for so many people. I wish there was more thought, and I think we should ask AI the question more: what will people do? And it's always that question: what kind of jobs will be lost? But it can potentially affect everybody, maybe even the developers of AI. So it's a question for everybody: what can it do? How can it help without taking away my job? How can it help really reinforce and take processes to a higher level, a better level? Of course, how can it save time for people? So in the work we do, as you guys know, we're helping really now we're helping firms like yours and other exit planning firms, business coaches, attorneys who work with partners, uh, all sorts of professionals who are involved at one stage or another in the multitude of business partnerships out there, whether they're family partners or non-family partners. And of course, in your business, as Pat mentioned, you're creating partnerships. The easiest, simplest example is when a solo owner gets ready to sell her business and wants to hand it off to, either her adult children or trusted employees. So there are a lot of people involved in this process, and I want to take a look at kind of each group of people. In the work we do, we have that platform, the online platform, to help partners structure a partnership or restructure a partnership if they're an existing partnership. And that's a complicated piece of work, let's say. It's a complicated challenge for partners, has always been a challenge for partners to figure out, wow, what do we need to talk about? What do we need to negotiate? What kind of understandings do we need? What kind of agreements do we need? Do we need something on paper? All of those questions are highly important. And one of the things that we all know from life and our own partnerships, or the partnerships our parents were in, or our uncles or our siblings, they have a bad track record. And so when I realized we were mediating, as Pat said, all kinds of partner disputes, and at one point, I think it slowly dawned on me, Pat, that, whoa, there's a need for prevention, not just conflict resolution. So when I started turning to that and looking at all that we had learned from partners who got sideways with one another, right? When I looked at that, I realized there weren't many people who were focused on owners of closely held businesses. Business school professors and others who write about businesses typically wrote about public companies because that's what they really primarily had access to. Private companies are private and closely held. That's the name for a reason, because so much of what's important about those companies happens at the very top, and nobody else knows. Not even the government really knows what goes on because they're private. So it's hard for people to know what it is we're supposed to do. What are the questions we're supposed to answer? Well, that's a place where AI can be helpful. You can now go in and Google, what are all the questions we need to ask ourselves? And you'll get a pretty good list. In fact, you'll get things from the book I wrote. So that's all out there. And now in our process, we have an online workbook with close to 500 questions in about 13 critical areas. So partners can get access to those questions, and that's good. And they can also Google or AI, they can also get what are good answers to those questions. Those kinds of searches with AI can really help educate themselves, as does the workbook. And then what's important with the process is there was a need for a real change in the way partners go about designing their partnerships. In fact, just the concept of designing a partnership is sort of a revolution, because typically it's what questions do we need to answer and what documents do we need to get. If we do that, we should be set to go. Actually, no. There have been people who've done all of that for ages and they still run into problems. Why do they run into problems? Because they haven't really sat down and recognized that this is a negotiation process with the two of us or three of us or five of us. And what we're doing is not trying to come up with the right answers, but trying to come up with what works for us. So we can get into that's a complicated process, and one that really benefits from having an expert guide. Just like in your work, an expert guide can help somebody who's thinking about exiting, whereas just going and getting all the right answers, is that enough? So that was a long answer to your question, or at least starting to get into that. And we can look at the guides and where AI can come help in that process with them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've recently did, just in the last week, David, was I wrote I took one of our old ebooks that we wrote probably almost 10 years ago on exit routes, and I wanted to revamp it. And I revamped it, adding, the title of it now is going to be Advisors, AI, and Exit Routes. And so in revamping it and using, I think I used Claude for this, maybe. In the process, I asked, take the context, take all the information I've put into this old ebook and summarize why a business owner would still need humans to help them. And so just last night, I published on on our blog, an AI generated blog post. It's basically a response to that question. And here are some of the categories that AI said that why we're still needed. Trust. Trust is a big one. Trust, for example, is not built on accuracy, it's built over time. It's relational. And so when we're talking about partnerships, trust is foundational for it to work. And so AI is telling me that, you know what, I can help with the data. I can help with just bringing some clarity to data and some information, some patterns, stuff like that. But I can't help with the trust factor. You want to speak to that a little bit, just how important trust is and how important the guide is in regard to trust?
It's such an important point you're making, Pat. Uh, if partners just go out there and get the answers, when you're dealing with partners, you're dealing with a relationship where trust comes into play. So the what we say is that when designing a partnership, there is a process and a product. You have to have a product. You have to have all of the agreements and understandings and commitments partners make to one another down on paper. That's the product. That is a good thing to have. People turn it over to their lawyers at the end to draft the legal documents because all of their intentions and understandings and agreements are there. But without going through that process, you can't really build trust on that. You can't build the trust on a document alone. So what the guides in that process are doing is they're making sure that everybody shares their ideas, because there's such a tendency when you're just working on your own to say, well, here's what I think. And somebody else says, yeah, and I agree with that. And the conversations get short circuited. A real person is there to make sure everybody is saying what they think and what they wrote in their preparation. And importantly, that everybody's listening. That's key. And then only a guide, here's a piece that only a guide can do. AI is not able to do this, to intervene in a group discussion and negotiation. That's something that AI can't do. So, for example, and it gets very sophisticated, but here's an example. A guide is listening to two partners talking, and one of them says something, and the other says, yeah, I agree. and and really, it takes a real person with a lot of sophistication and ability to work with people and listen carefully to say, back to the first person, did you get the sense that Jim just really agreed with you? You can do subtle things like that. You wouldn't want to just say, "Oh, I don't think you sounded confident." No, you'd probably start by asking the other partner, did that sound right? Did that sound confident? So that kind of subtle interpersonal dynamics, including reading body language, tone of voice, all of that stuff. In a group of people, that's not possible for AI to do.
Yeah, you know what? You just moved into the second category that my AI generated blog post answering that question. AI said, then there's context. What matters most is often what is not said, which is basically what you were just outlaying. And it gave some examples: the hesitation around a child in the business, the tension between fairness and equality, the quiet concern about employees, so on and so forth. So understanding the context and being able to discern what's going on there and bring that to the table into the discussion.
Such a great point. In all, especially high stakes negotiation, the context really matters, because these are hot button issues for people. People have a lot of sensitivity to these the points that are being negotiated, and what's being negotiated is, you know, for example, it's like how partners are going to pay themselves. That's essentially what they do. They pay themselves. They got to figure out how to do that. Well, you can ask AI, well, there are 5 partners here. He does this, he does that, she does that, and she does that. How do we pay ourselves? you know, there's so much that goes into that. It's about identity at that point. So many of these questions are about identity. So what people get paid and how they get paid, that's an identity issue. Another one is just, simply, oh, we have to develop our roles and authority here. Okay, well, that could seem obvious. So and so is going to have this role, so and so is going to have that title and role. But there's so much that's subtle about it. That's so much that affects people's identities. And that's very, very complex stuff. And AI really has very little to offer a group of partners in those kinds of subtle negotiations.
Hey, David, one thing I've noticed is that as a professional, AI helps potential clients weed out people who are quote unquote imposters. Because like imposters, just not as able as they say they are. For instance, if a client goes, like Pat and I had a meeting with a client who closely held business, S corp. Their CPA wasn't giving them all the answers about how an S corp operates from a tax standpoint. They had a bunch of questions, so they sent us a list of questions. We went through it, and it was really good. And at the end, I said, we had a really good meeting. At the end, I said, well, thanks for sending these questions. That was really good. And she said, yeah, I just asked AI. So I think, if someone is, and Pat and I have experienced this, where we'd have clients, prospective clients, talk to us, and you can tell they've done a lot of research through AI on their own. So, if you don't know what you're talking about, they're going to know it ahead of time. You know what I mean? So it kind of forces you to be on your A game, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you were talking about identity, and of course we experience that with business owners who are thinking about leaving, because 75% of them are miserable within 1 year of leaving, and so we've got a process for that. It's called Next Act, but it's very personal. A lot of deep questions. Who am I without this business? What is enough? What am I trying to preserve? And so again, AI can outline the options and do it very well. And I think that's only going to get better and better. And so we're just really diving in and figuring out how to leverage it to in all of our processes to make us more efficient and really remain relevant. uh, so in your process, which we of course subscribe to, how do you see, well, I think you already mentioned it, right, David, that AI can be helpful just in thinking through, like Walter just outlined a second ago, what are the right questions to be asking? Because like you said too, it's going to draw from your book a lot of what. And so, do you have any other thoughts about how listeners might use it effectively? We've talked about, yeah, I'll just stop there and see what you have to say.
So that this the we have a workbook that we've developed over multiple decades, really over more than 2 decades, and it's based on all of our work with mediation and all the different ways that partners get sideways with one another. So if you were to go out and look for a list of questions, it can even pull from the book, because Claude Anthropic went and clawed the whole book. So it's digested that, it can spit that stuff out. But we've been working for a couple of decades really perfecting that. And there are obvious questions, and there are obvious questions, and there are not so obvious questions. But then when we ask people to prepare, we're asking them to prepare not just to get the answers and the right partnership, because that's elusive. That's not even possible, because the right partnership for Donna and me would not be the right partnership for you and Walter. It would, no two partners really. But that's sort of a revolutionary idea. You need to discover what it is exactly that you guys want to do with your partnership, and it's unique. It's not like go out and discover the best answers. So in the workbook, we have things like, okay, here's what you think about how money is going to be handled, and how do you think your partner will react to what you think? Or do you think they think the same, or do you think they think different? And if it's different, how is it different? There are questions like that that really start working at the interpersonal side of it. And that, those kinds of things are what you get from an expert, really, not from AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important to note. But another way that it can help a partner planning for to sit down and do these kinds of negotiations, it really helps them flesh out the concepts and their options. And even something like preparing for difficult conversations. I mean, you can go to AI, Chat GPT or whatever, and say, here's the way I think money should work. I think my partner thinks it should work this way. How would I tell them that I don't think that's going to work? How would I break that to them? It can even give you suggestions for how to have difficult conversations.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So in the last number of minutes that we have, why don't we do this? Because I think it's important. We're such believers in this process, because we've experienced so many partnerships that have become sinking ships, so to say. Can you just give an overview, high level, of the process in some of the modules, if not all of them, so that listeners can understand what that process would look like?
Sure. The process is really, in a way, it's a simple process. It's a 3-step process. The online tool helps partners really prepare for the joint meetings, what we call the joint meetings with a guide, with an expert. And that preparation makes for very unique, unusual, very deep conversations about how we're going to do this together. And that's the second step, really. So the first step is really discover all these questions, things that people never would have thought about, but they're important in one partnership or another. They're important. And then you have those discussions, the second step, that are guided and are creative, and where the guide is helping partners to really listen to one another, hear one another, react to one another, whereas partners themselves on their own tend to short circuit those conversations. either something's not comfortable for somebody, it's too sensitive, or they just have this thought that we'll figure out later. A guide really helps partners to nail things down, get to the bottom of it. And even if it's a difficult conversation, that's okay. We can, this is a safe place to help get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing in that discovery process is a creative piece, and then in that process also the guide is working to on the platform to get those agreements and commitments down so they become part of the document. And that's the third step, documenting and reviewing what we agreed to make sure it's really what we agreed to. So a lot of times partners say, let's do this. I agree. Okay, good. Once they see it in writing, they say, wait a minute, that wasn't exactly what I agreed to. So that last process is really review and approval of the whole design of their partnership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So respond to this. So the work that we do, and as we think through how to leverage AI, we believe that our differentiator, if you will, is that, the knowledge has always been available. It's just available much quicker now. You can get it in seconds versus having to buy a book and read it and so on and so forth. But what we've experienced with business owners is procrastination. Even though the knowledge is there, they would often procrastinate for one reason or another. Not having the confidence to pull it all together and move something forward, not knowing where to start. Or what we've learned mostly is that because of everything that you were talking about earlier in regard to all the personal aspects of this, there can be a lot of emotional stuff that goes on that just paralyzes them from moving forward. And so we believe that the work that we do, and we're going to leverage AI in doing it, we help owners gain clarity. AI can help with that, but also conviction and courage if needed in order to move forward. Would you say, because I think I would say, if someone asked me, because partnership charter is one of our processes, I would say the same thing about that process that you just described, is it helps bring clarity and then conviction and encourage to move forward if indeed that's what we should do after going through the process. Because
Right.
sometimes you'll go through the process or maybe even get halfway through it and say, you know what, no, we shouldn't be partners.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Well, our belief is that to set up something as complicated as a business partnership that puts partners at such great risk financially, emotionally, reputationally, you need a structured process. So the partnership charter, interestingly, given the fact that there are so many people every day starting partnerships, it's really like the only structured process out there. It's the only structured process online that does help ensure people get through the process, because having a structure is one of the things that helps give people momentum and then the follow through they need to actually finish it. And it's also a structure in which they can have, it's a safe structure. People need a psychologically safe place to talk about things that they don't even know the answers to all of these things. They need to work it out together. They need to work through the ambiguity, the sensitive topics, and a structured process is really ideal for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Walter, did you have another question?
No, I'm good. This is
Okay.
this is really helpful.
Yeah. So, David, as we wrap up, a few things. First off, is there anything else that you would say is there a question we should have asked you that we didn't ask?
Mm, I don't. I think we covered everything. I think that the challenging piece for a lot of people is to get away from the notion that we're looking for the right answers to how we do this, and instead to recognize that this is a creative process. It's what we call a design process. We call it design your partnership, and to realize that you have tons of options, and the only way you get to what really will work for you and make you a strong partnership is conversations that are deep, transparent, and honest.
Yeah, and again, in regard to the topic today, those deep, personal, honest conversations can be AI can be helpful on the front end in helping you know what questions to go into those conversations with. Of course, our process, the partnership charter, has all those questions already. Um, so they don't really have to do that. But yeah, is there anything else in regard to key takeaways for listeners in regard to AI, where it's going to be helpful and where it quickly leaves off? And
Well, I think another way that we didn't really mention is that when there are these discussions and negotiations, it's a critical piece of it is for the guide to skillfully write down in the partnership charter document what what it is that partners are doing, what are their understandings, what are their commitments to one another. There's a lot to get down on paper, and AI is terrific for that. AI is terrific saying, okay, you guys talked about these things, you had these agreements, summarizing, checking the wording on things, seeing where there are discrepancies in different parts of the charter, even. That's a place AI can help. So AI can be useful to the partners themselves and the guides in that process.
excellent. Okay, fantastic. So thanks again for joining us. You're a regular. You'll be back again soon, I'm sure. Is there anything you want to promote today that you haven't already mentioned? I'll first off promote the book, which I've done over and over and over. If anyone's a partner out there, you should just buy the book, period. What
Yeah.
else what else would you
Well,
promote?
we're at a wonderful point in our company where we're reaching out to people all over the world, literally, who do work with partners, and they're going to, and we even have a map on our website, partnershipcharter.com, that shows where these advisors are. And Pat, of course, and and Walter are prominently located right around our nation's capital. So there are people to turn to who have that expertise that you still need. I would make one last comparison here between partners, which is what we're focused on, and solo owners who, you're often helping solo owners to sometimes create partnerships. It's such a different deal, and sometimes that comparison helps people. A solo owner can make any decision they want about their business. They can wake up one morning and decide to turn it around and do something different. If you have partners, you don't have that kind of freedom and flexibility. It's a totally different ball game. And the whole charter process is really looking to say, how is that different? How do we have to work together that a solo owner never has to think about?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just add this one little addendum to that is that I don't know if we mentioned this. At some point, you're going to have to discuss everything in the partnership charter process as partners. It's all going to come up somehow, some way. And boy, it's so much better if you get it on the front end. If you're thinking about a partnership, but even if you have one, it today's better
Such a
than
good point. Pat, Sidney Warburg, the founder of UBS, said, all things should be crossed in imagination before reality. It's so good to think things through because, as you say, in a partnership, sooner or later, and it may be years out, that you're faced with this stressful situation that affects the partners.
Excellent. Well, that's a great point to end on. So, listeners, if you want to reach out to David directly, again, thepartnershipcharter.com, you can reach him directly through his website, and you can get to him through us too as well. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business and strengthening transferability and sellability, or planning for that eventual exit, you can reach Walter and myself at 301-951-9090. If you'd like a copy of that Advisors AI and Exit Routes ebook I mentioned earlier, contact us. We'll send you a copy. Finally, if you've benefited from today's episode, please consider liking it and sharing it on social media. Thank you for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off.